Daffney Moore with Cascade Media Group, and tonight I have Dr. Christie Cruise with us to discuss her new book called Thick Black Lines. Welcome, Miss Cruise, Dr. Cruise.
Thank you for having me, Daphne. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Caveat, Dr. Cruise and I know each other. We go way back, and I'm in
Fifth grade. Fifth grade.
fifth grade. Oh Lord, that means I'm a little older than I thought I was. But
A little
she
bit.
is amazing. She's an author, an advocate, and she has this great book that she's written, and I have a copy, so get your copy. So, Dr. Cruz, tell us about Thick Black Lines. Well, first of all, tell us about yourself a little bit. Give the audience a little background, and then we'll get into Thick Black Lines.
Yeah, as you said, I'm Christie Cruise. I am originally from East St. Louis, Illinois. I am currently located just outside of Phoenix, Arizona. Um, I am an educator, an author, and an advocate. My background is in higher education administration. I started working in higher education immediately after undergrad. I worked at the University of Illinois in Urbana-Champaign, which is also my undergrad alma mater, for almost a decade. And during that time, I completed my master's degree at Eastern Illinois University in Charleston, Illinois. And I left the University of Illinois in 2006 and moved to Bowling Green, Ohio. And Bowling Green State University in Bowling Green, Ohio is where I completed my PhD. And so I've always been in higher education, whether as a student or as a professional. I've worked in student affairs, academic affairs, and enrollment management. I've always enjoyed working with young people and helping them to navigate systems of higher education, especially students of color, especially Black students. A lot of the students that I worked with during that time were first generation college students, and I was a first generation college student. And I understand the difficulties of navigating higher ed in terms of admissions, in terms of financial aid, academic success, all of those. And so I've worked in admissions, I've worked as an academic advisor, I've done student discipline, all of those good
So
things.
you
And I've
did
always
everything. You
I've
did.
done just about everything in higher education. I've taught, I've done student discipline, I've been an affirmative action officer, I've done assessment and just leadership. So all of the things, I've done all of the things.
So, your book, your poetry for Thick Black Lines, kind of to me is like a gumbo of all the things that you've talked about of what you've done and how it and how you really have talked about social justice, gentrification. You talked about the death of your mother. So you talk about all of these things that every day our young people and that we experience. And you wrote these beautiful poems. And I was
Thank
looking at one
you.
of them and it was saying, I can't swim. And I was thinking about, I can't swim. And I was going through those minds and thinking about all the things sometimes we can't do that our mother may not be able to do. So you kind of talk about some of those poems in your book.
Yeah, so Thick Black Lines, I when I started working on this book, I actually was working on a different book and I had a dream. The title actually was given to me in a dream. And when I had the dream and the title was given to me, I woke up in the middle of the night. Like most writers, you keep a pen and pencil or something near the bed. So I grabbed my phone and I typed it in there and I went back to sleep. And a lot of times I wake up in the middle of the night and I write stuff and I don't remember. So I have to look at my phone later to see what did I do last night? Like what did I write last night? So I looked at my phone maybe like in my notes section like a day later and I was like, oh, okay. Didn't think anything of it. Again, I was working on another book. And this title kept nagging at me. So I looked at it again and I was like, God, I don't even know what this means. Like, what is thick black lines? What does this mean? So at the time I wasn't sure. And I said, well, I'm just gonna pray on it and I'm gonna write. And so as I started to write and to pray on it, then it was revealed to me what this was. And so the book is broken up into three sections: thick, black, and lines. And the thick section are poems that are they're about topics that are heavy, topics that could break us, like grief and loss and depression and sexual assault. Black is about Black culture, and not all of Black culture, but at the time that I was writing this, what was really going on was a lot of police brutality.
Right.
And so Black really focuses on those issues and what was going on at the time. And lines, the last section, is about really policies that are created to keep us out of places, to keep us separate. So that's how the book came about. I went on sabbatical from July 2021, and I traveled across the US and the Caribbean from July 2021 through, like, it was October 2022. And so what you see in this chapbook, and it's a chapbook, and chapbooks are smaller
Right.
books.
Right.
When I initially started, it was going to be a full-length poetry book, but you know how you get to a point where you're like, this is
I'm
all that
done.
needs to be in
This
this
is all I
book,
got.
right? Like, I had other stuff, but I was like, this is all that needs to be in this book. And so that's where they came about. And so a lot of, so, you think about what was going on in 2021 and 2022. We were coming off the heels of the pandemic. We had Black people, especially in addition to the pandemic, were being traumatized in
Yes.
ways that that our ancestors have been traumatized before, but in a way that you were able to see some things in real time, and then you were able to watch some things over and over again,
Right.
and
Right.
it was almost like it was this sport almost of killing Black folk in 2020.
Yeah. And
Right? You
so,
had Breonna Taylor, you had
yeah.
George Floyd, we had just come off of Ahmaud Arbery. So there was a lot going on with that. And then in 2019, I had lost my mother. And so, from 29, so the poems in the book reflect um things that I was going through from 2019 up through the middle of 2022.
When I read the poem about your mother,
Mhm.
it takes a lot of courage to write about your grief
Yeah,
and to share it with other people.
yeah,
I know that that had to be very difficult, but for me, it really inspired me. I have a lot of friends that have lost their mother, and I was literally talking to someone yesterday who had lost their mother about 10 or 15, about 15 years ago, and she carries the grief where she still mourns almost every day,
yeah.
and that made me think of you. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so I'll read the poem if that's okay.
Yeah, read it.
Um, it's this poem that you are referencing is entitled "The Day My Mother Died." Mhm. The day my mother died, it was a Monday. It was the eighth day in the fourth month of that year. That's the day my soul broke open. As a result, I shattered into fragments of flesh and shards of bone. My soul evaporated on that day, and I watched through sockets encircled with soggy lashes. And each day after, a centripetal force has whisked the remaining particles together to form something, a shell of my former self, something blue and gray and absent of the contents that matter most. Mondays in the fourth month are unlike Mondays in the 3 months before and 8 after. Then again, I don't expect them to feel as they did before my soul consumed the axe that broke it open to begin with.
Wow, that's powerful.
So, you know, I wrote that poem because that was writing is the way that is my way of expressing. And I remember calling my therapist and I sent her a message and can death be traumatic? I feel like I've been traumatized. And she
Right.
said, yes, death can be traumatic. And that's really what this was. I felt like I felt traumatized. I was traumatized. I wasn't my mother wasn't sick for a long period of time. She had gotten sick. We thought it was something else, and it ended up being something else, and she passed suddenly. Um, so I wasn't, we weren't expecting her to
Right.
pass. And so that was one thing. And, I think that even though you're aware of death and you know that people aren't going to live forever, when it happens, especially to a parent, especially when it's unexpected, and even when it isn't unexpected, there really is a part of you that is gone. This is the person who carried me in her womb for 9 months. We shared a body. I was in her body. And so a part of me is gone. And I remember my therapist told me the woman that you were before your mother passed away is gone, and you have to start again as this woman whose mother is deceased, because you have a new norm. And that was the truth. So I my mother has passed away in April of 2019. There isn't a day that goes by 5 years later that I don't think of her. The mourning has gotten easier, but there are some days that it hits me like a
Right.
ton of bricks, and there are some days that I'm okay, but I'm aware every day that I am without her. And so yeah, it's that piece was that was a needed piece. I needed to get that out. And that was one of the reasons why I left Illinois and started this sabbatical, because everything in
Reminded
that
you.
area reminded me of her. And I didn't have any place that I wanted to go, but I knew I needed to leave.
Right.
And
Can you
so
talk? Go ahead. Can
yeah,
you talk about how, your therapy? Because a lot of Black
yeah,
people don't believe in therapy. It's the last thing we
yeah.
gonna do. And can you talk about the importance of that, especially in a culture where we're just starting to really think that, hey, maybe I do need some therapy. Maybe I need someone to talk to, and it's just not my sibling.
Listen, I am a firm believer in therapy. I am a firm believer in all the things mental health that are going to make you better. I I knew as a ch- I'll say this. I was diagnosed with major depressive disorder, generalized anxiety disorder, and panic disorder. When
Wow.
I was finally officially diagnosed and I looked back, I was depressed as a child. There were a lot of things that were going on. So I was depressed as a child, but in our community, we learn to push through until you can't push through anymore, right? And
Right.
we have coping mechanisms, but everybody, no matter who you are, your coping mechanisms are going to give out on you at some point, especially when they're unhealthy. They've not been updated, right? And so my coping mechanism when I wasn't aware of what was going on with me was food. And so I saw my first therapist in undergrad, in college, and
Okay.
a friend recommended that I see someone because I was not doing well, but I didn't know what was wrong. I always was able to, whenever something was going on, I was always able to push through. I don't have time for this, or my ancestors went through slavery,
So we
and
just
they
gonna
made
fight
it
on.
through. So I'm just gonna fight on. Well, our ancestors were not okay. They were
Right.
not okay.
Yeah.
And so I went, and it was the best decision I made. And so I would see a therapist on and off, and then it eventually, once I was diagnosed, therapy and medication became a part of my mental health self-care routine. And there are other things that I do. In addition, I journal, I meditate, I pray, I exercise. But I had therapy yesterday. I do therapy on
Okay.
Tuesday.
Okay.
I see a therapist regularly. what we know is that Black people, we have one of the highest instances of mental health issues in our community for a whole host of reasons.
Right.
Post-traumatic stress, generational trauma, all of those things. But we are less likely to seek help. And again, it is because we've been taught you don't tell nobody your business, you don't put our business in the street, ain't nothing wrong with you. You
Shake it
need
off.
to shake it off. You strong, you a strong Black woman, right? We
Yeah.
hear all of these messages, but what we see is the young woman, what was her name? Cressley, the woman, Miss America,
Yeah.
I mean, you think about the type of pain you have to be in to do a running start and jump off of a building,
I mean, that, that
right?
really
You
shocked me
think,
because she was at the height of her career too. So
and there are as myself, I am someone who
function.
functions in my disability, but I'm
Yeah.
also somebody who has suicidal ideations and someone who
Wow.
knows that I need to take my medication and see my therapist because I have learned to function, but that doesn't mean I'm not in pain. And
Right.
so even with that young lady, I think about myself, people assume, oh, you're a doctor, you got a PhD, you're writing books, you're doing all of these things. I know how to function in trauma. I know how to function in
Right.
hurt. A lot of us do.
And is that why you wrote It Doesn't Hurt Anymore? Like, I mean, your
Yeah,
other,
my
your
first
book.
book, It Don't Hurt Now, was
Yeah.
really that was, I didn't even have I'm a writer, but my writing has been academic writing. I
Okay.
love creative writing, but it wasn't what I was trained in. And so It Don't Hurt Now really was me needing to just get some stuff
Stuff
out.
off. Okay.
Right? Whether I had the skill and ability to do it, it was just like I needed to get some stuff out. And so a lot of It Don't Hurt Now are journal excerpts or
Okay.
notes that I had just written of just a lot of the pain that I was going through. And so that was therapeutic in and of itself and was really a part of it was cathartic and it was really a part of my therapy too for myself to just let that go. The other thing too is in our community we carry a lot of secrets. We carry a lot of other folks' secrets. You can't
Yes, we
tell
do.
this, or everybody in the family know, but we just don't talk about it. Everybody know that there's a child molester in the family, or you know what I'm saying, and we
Yes.
just don't talk about it because we don't want Uncle such and such going to jail, or and so you go to functions with this person who has traumatized you,
And you see
right?
your
So
purpose.
we have
Yeah.
a lot of that stuff going on as well. And that is the type of stuff that we function through. That was the type of stuff I was functioning through. So I was able to get a bachelor's degree, a master's degree, a PhD, write academic articles, do all of this stuff and at times having suicidal ideations and thinking about contemplating ways to commit suicide. And
Wow.
most people wouldn't know that, right?
That's true. I mean, that's true. I mean, I learned about it because we started having some conversations. So, my final question that I really want you to talk about is like how now that you've been through these things, you've had therapy, you've written two amazing books plus
Thank
more.
you.
How can we help our youth and young people get through these times? Because thinking about Sonia Massey and the
Yeah.
trauma that she was going through and to be murdered because she was asking for help.
Help, yeah.
How do we get our young people to ask for help and maybe find their voice like you found your voice in writing and journaling and seeking therapy? How do we move the needle to make sure this next generation is going to do that as well?
We lead by example. We lead by example and we talk about that's why this book and It Don't Hurt Now are so important. We lead by example. We talk about what we're going through. Our young people need to know that Daffney Moore, this amazing woman who's doing all of these amazing things for her community, gets sad too. gets tired too. Our youth need to know that Dr. Christie Cruise, this person writing these poems and writing these books, suffers from major depressive disorder and panic disorder in general. We have to be honest. We have to disclose to our young people. We have to, in addition to disclosing, letting them know what is it that we are doing to be better. I am not afraid. I will shout it from the mountaintops. I go to therapy regularly. I take my medication regularly. I do journaling. I do all the things that I need to do to be better. That doesn't mean that I don't have some rough days. I do. But I think we have to lead by example. We have to let them know the importance of sharing what's going on. We have to let them know the importance of having a support system. It's cool to have friends that you can do some silly stuff with, but where are your friends who are really, when things are going down, gonna call your parents up and say, I'm worried about such and such,
Right.
or gonna let the school counselor know, I'm worried about my friend, right? So you've got to be intentional about the people that you spend time with and the people who are in your village, who are close to you. My friends, I have the best support system, present company included, where I can be honest with my friends and say, look, I'm not having this. I'm not doing good. And there are times I've texted you and you're like, how you doing? I'm not doing good.
I'm not gonna, and I'd be like,
I'm
call
not
your
doing, I'm
therapist
not
because I
doing
may
good.
not be able to help you with that one, but call your therapist. And
Right. And
takes
and
care
that's what
of
my
you.
friends do. Have you taken your medicine? Have you skipped medication? Have you called your therapist? Have you so, and because my friends know and they've known me long enough, they can also tell. I have one friend, she'll immediately say, are you taking your medicine? When was the last time you took your medication?
Yeah, because
And
you know,
she can tell. And I'll be like, 2 days ago. She's like, no, you need to take your medication. I can tell you're off. Something's off. And not being afraid. Like, it was hard for me to accept initially that I needed medication and I needed therapy. But that is part of my treatment plan, and it is what's keeping me alive. It's what's keeping me alive and what's keeping me functioning. And I have a lot more to give, and our young people have so much more to give. And they've just got it. We've got to continue to talk about these things, to write about these things, and encourage them to do the things that are going to help them to be their best selves.
well, I thank you so much for sharing your story, for letting me interview you today to talk about Thick Black Lines.
Thank
You can get it
you.
on Amazon, y'all. And, you know, it is very humbling to hear someone talk about so many personal things. And I think it's important that we continue to do that. So I will close with this: conversations matter. So let's keep talking, and I'll see you next week.
This is brought to you by Kansas City Business Association, working to improve our community.